One of Bleach's best strengths as a story is just how effective its twists are, where they're shocking but they don't feel like they're unearned, but instead are natural bits of information that we're slowly uncovering as we spend time in this world with Ichigo. There have been plenty of times where one of those secrets has blown my mind and caught me off guard, only for me to realize that the clues were there the whole time and I just hadn't sniffed them out. The revelations in Bleach are shocking sometimes, yes, but also woven so well into the fabric of the story. Sometimes it's like Kubo is lying by omission when he's just waiting to hit me with the next one. And this latest one, this may be the most shocking one so far, because oh my god, I wasn't ready for this, and it's left me with so many questions while I try to pick up the pieces of my brain. It's been a lot to chew on these past few days since reading and watching, like a lot. It's the kind of reveal that makes you rethink so many parts of the series and go back searching for clues that may or may not even be there. But we'll get into that in a bit. First, we need to talk about where we last left things, with Head Captain Yamamoto being tricked, having his Bankai stolen, and then being seemingly cut down, and well, yeah. He's very, very, very dead. Yuabaha gave him absolutely no respect, by the way, telling him why he wasn't considered one of the 5 special threats because he'd gone soft and didn't even bother getting his arm repaired by Orihime because he didn't want to bother a human with that. But I really liked Old Man Yama still trying to stop him, even after he'd already been cut in half. But then Yuabaha just makes sure he's even more dead. Like, I really don't think anyone could come back from this unless you're like Cell or Majin Buu. So last video was essentially a tribute to Old Man Yama, but I'll say one last thing for now. While Yamamoto wasn't my favorite character, he was easily one of the most badass and has my respect for how many great moments he brought to the story. But in his last moments, he did bring us some more lore and some information about the days of the war with the Quincy originally. We got our first vague look at the original 13 captains, which was a pretty fascinating idea. I didn't recognize any of the silhouettes besides young Yama, and in the manga, that was all we got. One panel of silhouettes, but when they got around to doing the anime, we were shown a hell of a lot more of them as we see them actually fight back in the day. They really expanded that flashback, and some of these designs really stood out to me. You had a few that just ooze kind of a cool, dangerous aura, and you have the girl with the eye patch who's got this kind of mischievous look about her and a little bit of a Ruruka vibe, honestly. You've also got Orochimaru and a few really creepy looking members too, especially this man who is the stuff of absolute nightmares and stood out to me immediately. Like, what the hell even is that? But it makes sense because we hear, and in the anime full on see, that the original 13 captains were all pretty violent, bloodthirsty, terrible people, and like vicious warriors. So I assume that they all must have died in combat at some point, or met some other horrible non-peaceful end. And I was originally thinking that now that Yuabaha has Yamamoto's Bankai, if he was responsible for any of their deaths, maybe we'll see some of them come back as like charred skeletons or something. That would be kind of wild to bring them back to bolster the Quincy ranks and to fight the current 13 captains. But the anime edition made me think otherwise, since Yuabaha was beaten while they all watched. They were all alive and standing there, so I don't think that, even if he did use that Bankai, I don't think it would bring them back. Still, that would be wild if there's a good explanation. Or this might have just been a fun little history drop. Either way, it was so cool to see them, and this bit of lore offered some last-minute insight into Yamamoto, because it was fascinating to see how he viewed those days. He didn't look back on them very fondly. There was a wonderful little flashback where he's talking to a young Shunsui about a painting of himself in his heyday, where it's shown that he sees his old self as something of a monster, something that he was not trying to become again, while Yuabaha seemed to think the opposite, that turning away from being bloodthirsty warriors and kind of becoming complacent in a time of peace was a weakness and pathetic, and he saw the Soul Reapers as a shell of what they used to be. It's clear that there was a time when the squads used to be much more warmongering and on a darker path, but Yamamoto, I guess, saw the light and steered them into being what they are now. And while they're not perfect, this is definitely more peaceful than what those guys apparently were. but Yuabaha sees that as the reason that they all got beaten so easily in these past few chapters and episodes. You know, he says that the 13 squads really died back when the war ended. You know, without a war to fight, the Soul Reapers became these weak shadows of what they used to be. Really interesting stuff. I like that a lot. There was also a brief mention of Squad Zero, who we learned a while ago are the Soul King's personal royal guards. Aizen was really interested in them when we first heard about it, and I did theorize that maybe Isshin was one of them, but I hope this means we're gonna see them soon, because Yuabaha was confident that they'd be coming and that they were gonna wait for them, and is it a coincidence that we're setting up Squad Zero's arrival right when we learn something important about Isshin and his wife? One thing that I want to draw attention to that helped emphasize the importance of this was the weather. I've spoken before about the symbolism of the rainfall and its recurring use in Bleach, but I found its use in many moments within these chapters to be particularly effective and stood out even more in the anime. So I'll bring up the rain as I go through, starting here with when it begins. After Yamamoto's momentous use of his Bankai sucked away so much of the moisture in the Soul Society, the rain starts to pour down once he deactivates it, almost like he's letting go of everything that he's borrowed for his Bankai, and this corresponds to when his downfall really begins as he's killed beneath the downpour. To me, this added an extra bit of oomph to the whole sequence. I've talked about how the rain sometimes feels like it's there to represent Ichigo's internal struggles, his tears in a way. It raining to douse the final flames of Head Captain Yamamoto serve a similar function. He took all of this moisture from the surrounding area, and now it's like it's all coming back down upon him, like the Soul Society itself is crying for its fallen leader and its dying defenders. Or you could even look at it as Ichigo's cries as he's trying to break through and reach the Soul Society before anyone else dies, and is unfortunately a little too late. With the head captain dead, they call in these reinforcements of Quincy troopers to finish their purge of Soul Society, which feels just so overboard. After the Sternritters seemed to be handling it well on their own, it just made this more hopeless and overwhelming, which is exactly the mindset Kubo wanted the reader in, as he then had Ichigo miraculously escape Kyogei's jail and finally arrive in Soul Society. And one of the first things he sees? Byakuya Kuchiki, still embedded in that wall after getting defeated by his own Bankai. I was honestly a little surprised Byakuya was still breathing after the last time we saw him. I was glad he held on a bit longer to give us a final moment with Ichigo, and what a great moment it turned out to be that once again highlighted how far this character has come. Byakuya has been beaten, absolutely devastated with shame over his defeat and the death of his comrades that he led into battle, and Byakuya, seeing their last possible hope, reminds Ichigo that he's a human and shouldn't even be there, which was a wonderful callback to their early interaction. Back then, it was meant as very serious condemnation, calling Ichigo a human that stole power and was a thief, and that shouldn't be around Soul Society and shouldn't be involved in the matters of the Soul Society, but that's evolved into something much more poignant. He still recognizes that Ichigo isn't exactly traditional, but even then still pleads for him to help save the Soul Society in an incredibly powerful image. You can feel the weight of it and the anger coming from Ichigo as Byakuya shares his last wish, but Byakuya trusting Ichigo with the defense of Soul Society, pleading for him to help, and knowing that these two are now comrades and friends and colleagues. It was just an extremely powerful moment before Byakuya breathes his last breath and his sword shatters to pieces. Would I have liked to see a final scene between him and Rukia? Sure. But I think that adds to the tragedy of war, and of death in general, really. You don't always get the chance for closure with your loved ones, or an opportunity to say goodbye or finally speak all the things that were left unspoken. Back to the rain in these chapters, I got pretty emotional seeing Byakuya's tears during his final talk with Ichigo, and the rain beautifully tied into that, like it was helping to hide the tears. A stoic character like Byakuya hasn't shown much emotion like that, so it made that moment even more powerful. Like he finally felt comfortable enough to cry because it might not be seen. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that hit me hard, just adding to the already heavy emotions of that scene. scene. But seeing Byakuya that way and hearing his request just helped light this fire under Ichigo, and he wastes no time going after the leader of the Quincy. I was very excited, and it got me so hyped, but after everything that's happened, I kind of had to pause and be like, okay, yeah, go get his ass. But then what? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna stand a chance against any of this when nobody else could? So there wasn't much hope, but Ichigo's sheer anger and determination almost convinced me for a second. I'm like, yeah, you can do this. So after confronting Yuabaha and his right-hand man Hashvolt, we see Ichigo just go straight for the people responsible for all of the destruction. But I swear, if this man gasps, "Your Majesty," one more time, that's all he does. Well, until later, but we'll get there. He's also very obsessed with purging people. It's made pretty clear that Ichigo doesn't stand a chance against Yuabaha, and that's when something really, really weird happened when his body protected itself from Yuabaha's blade, thanks to Blute. You know, that internal protection Quincy's have? Yeah. That was real weird, and I had no idea what to make of it at first. Like, my brain had trouble processing that for a few seconds, and all I could think was maybe something to do with Kyuuge's powers grafted onto Ichigo or something, but I definitely wasn't expecting the actual explanation. It turns out that something dormant was awakened inside of Ichigo while stuck in that cage, and is now active. But still, as I was seeing this all happen, I kept wondering how he even escaped the jail to begin with, since Kyuuge said it would be impossible, and Kubo made a big point to show that there was no getting out of it no matter how hard Ichigo tried. But then the next stage of this reveal was learning that the only people that couldn't be trapped by the jail, the only people that could even possibly escape, were other Quincy. This is when it really started to sink in. He was saying Ichigo is a Quincy. But I didn't have time to really push through my confusion or even ponder that much before Yuabaha said that Ichigo clearly didn't understand himself, or even his own mother. And then it all fell into place, and made my brain absolutely explode. Ichigo's mother was a Quincy. This right here was the most shocked I think I've ever been in Bleach, without question. Aizen's whole heel turn was shocking, sure. Isshin being a Soul Reaper was crazy. Everything with Ginjo was shocking, but this was something that hit me harder than any of those. If you saw my manga read-along on Patreon, then you saw how my mind actively broke after reading this reveal. Here's just a glimpse of those tumultuous few minutes. Not even your own mother. Ichigo is a Quincy? Part Quincy? Is that what we're saying here? His mom was a Quincy? What? Okay. What the Are you serious? Are you serious? Okay. What? What the hell is going on? Okay. Give me answers, Kubo, because what the hell? Because his mom's a Quincy? Why do you do this to me? You guys have known? Is that true? Yeah. Ichigo seems to be part Quincy. He's the product of a union between a Soul Reaper and a Quincy, so is kind of in some ways a bridge between the two warring factions, and I'm sure that couldn't have been sanctioned by either side, but since learning the truth about Ichigo's dad, I've thought that him being part Soul Reaper and part human was like a concoction for why he's able to become so strong so quickly, but now it makes even more sense if it wasn't just a normal person on that half of his family, but a Quincy. Masaki Kurosaki, the woman whose death has played such a vital role in the life of our protagonist, who watches the Kurosakis eat breakfast from her poster on the wall, might have been much more involved in all of this than it appeared. Hell, if she was a Quincy, that might completely change the framework around her death. From what we saw, the Grand Fisher, my boy, my beloved anglerfish hamster, R.I.P., killed her because Kid Ichigo fell for his lure trap, and Masaki got in the way. But maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe she was the real target the whole time, Or she even knew the Grand Fisher. Maybe she tried hunting the Grand Fisher. We know that he was like super dangerous and Soul Reapers were trying to get him for a long time. So maybe the Quincy were too or something. Maybe there was something much deeper going on back then. I don't know, but this opens up that possibility and makes me think way differently about that whole sequence. Crazy. And then there's what this might mean for Isshin's backstory too, which I've been demanding for like a year and a half. Kubo, this is the perfect time to finally give me that flashback, right? Just show everything. There's now more reason to. I was already excited to learn about Isshin, but now I'm even more excited to learn about Misaki too. He was a Soul Reaper and she was a Quincy and they found love, so it's already perfectly set up for some sort of star-crossed lovers on opposite sides thing. I've been under the impression that it was something like him falling in love with a human and leaving the Soul Society for her. But this potentially would make that so much more complicated and dramatic. It's one thing to fall in love with a mortal and like leave Soul Society, but he fell in love with the enemy. Like, could that fact be why he either ran away or was cast out and lived in the mortal world? Did they flee together? I don't know, but I really need to find out. So just give me that flashback, Kubo. I am ready. I've been ready for a while, and now I'm just like, okay, you have to now. So just do it. Like, Ichigo was graciously going to let his dad tell him on his own time, but at this point, after hearing this, honestly, Ichigo, just go back to the clinic, dodge your dad's surprise attacks, kick your sisters out of the room, make sure your cousin isn't on the couch, and then sit your dad's ass down and say, what the hell happened back then? You hear me, Ichigo? Do it. Just ask him. Ask him and then let him tell us everything. Yeah. Crazy stuff. I was sitting there wondering about Ichigo's status. You know, he's born from a Soul Reaper dad and apparently a Quincy mom, and he is also hollowified, so he has part hollow stuff going on, and he also is a Fullbringer because of what happened to his mom. Ichigo's like this just mix of like everything, you know? And I'm pretty sure that Aizen had said he was a Soul Reaper and a human, so I went back to confirm, and he does say that he's human and right before Isshin shows up and reveals to Ichigo that he's a Soul Reaper. So the obvious implication was that he was human and Soul Reaper, because there's his dad as a Soul Reaper confirming. That's what I got from it at the time, and I still think that was the intention of the scene, given how great of a way to reveal all of that was. But let's put on the crazy tin hats for a second and think of it another way, because Aizen never got a chance to actually say Soul Reaper because the proof showed up instead. So he didn't have to, but still, he didn't actually say Soul Reaper. So there's a chance maybe he was gonna say Quincy, but Isshin showed up in the nick of time to stop him from saying it, to prevent him, to hit Ichigo with the less confusing parent reveal maybe? That's possible, I guess, but it still doesn't really work, because he still said human and if the last word was Quincy, he'd be completely leaving out that Isshin is a Soul Reaper. So I guess Aizen maybe didn't know about Misaki being a Quincy, because he assumed that one of the parents at least was human, but also Quincy's are sort of still human, right? So maybe that's covered under that, I don't know, but I assume he had to have known, right? Not only is he Aizen, but he also was supposedly manipulating Ichigo's journey since the day he was born. So he must know, and that probably played a big part in why he took such an interest in Ichigo. Maybe the human he was referring to was a Quincy, and he was just covering both. There is room for interpretation, I suppose. I'm still just trying to process this revelation, because it's the kind of plot twist that changes the foundation of the series. I'm sure if any of you have reread it with this in mind, there's probably more hints and emotions with the fact that Ichigo was secretly part Quincy. If I reread the series, maybe I'd see all these like hints and clues. Like, that's kind of what happened to me when I learned Isshin was a Soul Reaper. I looked back on parts differently, and this is already having that effect. So I've spent some time the last few days going back to earlier parts of Bleach to try to see if I can find any clues, just like the Aizen phrasing might have been. But I didn't come up with much, honestly. I'm probably just missing some stuff, but I did look at some things. Like, there's the possibility of Masaki's death being much more targeted that I mentioned, because of course Kid Ichigo wouldn't know the actual reasoning, so maybe Grand Fisher was after her the whole time. But I would think that that would be something he would have mentioned when he was tormenting Ichigo, you know? One big thing that I thought was a good clue was when I was looking at different things around Isshin that might be a hint, you know, different parts of the series where Isshin might have said something or done something that could reveal that his wife was a Quincy, and there's this charm that he gave to Ichigo that he said was something Masaki gave. So I thought maybe this could be something. The charm did protect Kon and Ichigo's body from the Grand Fisher, and the Quincy's are known for carrying around like pendants and medallions and things like that. So I was just like, Jinkies, I found an actual clue. Only for Isshin to be like, I actually made this specifically for you, Kon. Probably to protect Ichigo's body. So I guess he lied about it belonging to Masaki, probably, just to make sure that, like, maybe that Ichigo would be less likely to throw out the protection charm if it was from his mom. But I was like, that could have been something. That felt like it was almost a really concrete bit of evidence, but now I'm not so sure. There is another hint toward something like this, because I always kind of wondered why Ichigo was a Fullbringer, because Fullbringers' mothers get attacked by Hollows while they're pregnant, but then live, you know, they survive. Whereas the only attack we knew of with Misaki was when she died after Ichigo was already like a little kid. So that couldn't have been what triggered his Fullbring. So I always thought that was a little weird. I thought maybe it was connected to Isshin being a Soul Reaper. Maybe him fighting Hollows as a Soul Reaper left him with that stain that passed on to Ichigo, you know? But if she was a Quincy, then she probably did fight Hollows and maybe did get harmed, and maybe that left a mark that then remained when she gave birth, and that's when the Fullbringer potential began. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's possibility. I feel like that makes sense. She had to have been attacked by a Hollow earlier than the Grand Fisher killing her. So that leaves it much more of a possibility of her being attacked if she was a Quincy that battles Hollows. It was kind of fun trying to find breadcrumbs, but the specific ones were not really leading me to definitive answers. You know, the real clue to me is just how mysterious Masaki's death is in general and the circumstances around Ichigo's exponential power boosts. Anyone that's seen my very first video or been around since the early days of the channel knows how much the story of Ichigo's grief over the loss of his mother means to me on a very personal level. It's what made me love the series, what turned it from a fun supernatural shonen to something much more dear to me. Knowing that there's a whole other aspect to her death, something that we weren't aware of, and that a lot of those feelings and that history is going to come back here in the final arc is brilliant. To me, the loss of Masaki is such an important part of Ichigo, the core of his character in a lot of ways. It just feels right to bring that back around, to come full circle with those early parts of the series. I'm ready to cry. Like, I feel like it's gonna hit me in ways that Memories in the Rain hit me back then. So I'm ready, Kubo. Like, this is the emotional core of the story, and I feel like this is great to have it return. But I'm just so fascinated by whatever the history is and what this means for Ichigo going forward. Will this allow him to access even more powers? Can he tap into things like reishi absorption or creating projectiles? I mean, his Getsuga Tensho kind of already is, I guess, but you know what I mean, like throwing arrows and whatnot. He's already got Blute since awakening his Quinciness in the jail, so maybe there's more on the way. And with this revelation, we also see that Yuaba's interest isn't just in killing Ichigo, but capturing him and trying to convert him over to join the Vandenreich, I guess, instead of falling with the rest of the Soul Reapers. But before things can escalate any further as they try to capture Ichigo, the Vandenreich are forced to retreat back into their shadows, as there was apparently a time limit of how long they could stay. I wonder why that is, but apparently Yuabaha had less time than he thought he did because of his visit with Aizen, and he realized that Aizen did something to mess with his perception and to make him lose track of time. And I love this. Even at his weakest and in the midst of being sealed and incarcerated in a hole, Sosuke Aizen still manages to manipulate something. Our puppet master just can't help himself. He's gotta trick someone. He's gotta fool someone. That's just what he does. And he inadvertently, or maybe intentionally, kind of saved Ichigo's life here. They were about to take Ichigo, and they would have, if not for Aizen's intervention. He kind of saved the day. And after Ichigo tries to stop them from escaping, Hashvolt cuts Ichigo's sword in two, and then they leave. And it's such a powerful image to see not only the broken sword, but also just the look on Ichigo's face after everything he's been through. What a horrible day. That's, I'm sure, raising a lot of questions and confusion in his mind. Ichigo's broken Zanpakuto perfectly captures where his mind and his soul are probably at right now, and seeing it so fragile and broken to me represents that's how he feels about himself after hearing all of this. He's not sure of who or what he even is anymore. He's just confused and hurt, and I'm sure this is stirring up all kinds of trauma for him. And of course, the rainfall plays a big role in the atmosphere during Ichigo's hopeless fight and the revelation about Misaki. Not only is it yet another time that Ichigo is left in shock in the rain, but it directly ties to the day that his mother died all that time ago. For moments of trauma like that, it's those types of things that he might remember even from all that time ago. The falling droplets as his mom held him one last time trying to protect him. It connects these moments from her final breaths where she was with him to now when he learns for the first time the actual truth about his own mother. It just made this even more powerful, and I love the continuing motif throughout the series so much. It's just not Bleach without some rain, you know? The final line was chilling as the Quincy King left. My son, born in the dark, is a beautiful way of describing Ichigo's life that's slowly been being illuminated for him over time. It started with him being able to see ghosts, eventually learned that he was part Soul Reaper, and now part Quincy. He spent much of his life not knowing the truth about himself or his birth, but now, hopefully, me and him are gonna find what really happened back in the day. Because I also feel like I've been in the dark with him. Sure, my birth in this case came when I read the first page of Bleach, but I've been getting fooled and had the truth kept from me, just like Ichigo. We're in the final arc, let's learn it all. I'm excited for whatever comes next when we hopefully get some answers, but for now, I'm just trying to process the things we've learned, so thank you for being here to help me do that. This whole arc has just been insanity so far. From the battles, the revelations, the scale of it, it really does feel like we're getting like a culmination of everything, and it's been wonderful. And I can't wait to see what's next. So I'll see you next time. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you want to continue more of the journey with me, you can join my Patreon where I do a manga read-alongs and anime episode watches before I do these videos. So you could follow me there if you want some extra stuff. Otherwise, I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.